music to the noise, yeah, the mess we make. Machine Paul and Kelly get caught in the fray. Facts and logic with a twist of chest. Strip it down to truth, yeah, forget the rest. Humor blows the lies right out of the park. Look beyond the shadows that set the dark. Sparks of laughter fire up the night, bringing clarity where they blur the fight. Cut through the chaos, yeah, the tangled lies. Steve Fun Kelly with a set of clear eyes. Truths and jokes gonna rock this show. Step into light where the real facts glow.
And welcome to the Pun Show. Thanks for joining me. Hope you're ready for your weekend. I know I am. So let's start off with just a couple of random things. I've been thinking about the whole immigration crisis a lot, or, which we'll get into later, which is why I've been doing all this. But I keep coming back to this idea that we have a mindset in this country of just blame-oriented politics and not solution-oriented politics. And I'm talking about pretty much everybody. I'm not, saying that the Republicans do this or the Democrats do this, or even the independents do. Everybody does this. Almost everybody is just more about blame than they are about solutions. If I were to say, I think maybe Bernie Sanders, even though I'm not sure I agree with everything he says, at least that seems to be his objective, is like to solve problems, not just like yell about whose fault it is. Hello, Kitty. How you doing? So I'm thinking, I just wish more political programming and stuff would talk about this. And when I'm sharing these things, I think that I share the liberal perspective more because I believe the liberal perspective more. And especially when it comes to Trump, there's just so much based in lies. But there's things that I think happen too. For instance, this commercial driver's license thing in New York. There's a real issue with people having commercial driver's licenses that shouldn't have them, and there are real instances where people have died because of it. And this happened with a Republican governor in Illinois 20 years ago. And it's happening now in Florida with a guy that got his license from New York City. So it's not relative to like right now or one person or one party. It's a systemic problem that has gone on for decades, and it all ties back to the immigration issue. And that's where I just wish we could talk about immigration and how to solve problems, and not just how to blame somebody for how many illegals there are over here, which is just, to me, such an ugly word. I never could understand why people would equate this one civil offense. That's the one thing that makes you an illegal, Like, why is it like not murder that makes you an illegal? Why is it not burglary that makes you an illegal? Why is it not rape that makes you an illegal? Why is the one thing that makes you an illegal crossing the border illegally? There's all kinds, well, that's because they're here illegally. But other people do other things that are illegal. We don't call them illegals, we call them criminals. Now we're calling them illegal criminals, as though there's like a legal criminal or something like that. Like a space legal criminal. So anyway, I've been like looking more into this whole thing, and this is the one thing that's been perplexing me about Trump is like he says he wants to do certain things, right? And he says he wants to solve immigration. He says he wants to like win the peace prize. So we'll say, like, let's say he will put this in the best possible terms, we'll steelman this and say he wants world peace. He wants to bring about world peace. He wants to improve the economy, according to him, like what he's saying. If we're putting everything in the most favorable terms, that he would agree that's what he's trying to do. And then he wants to, like stop crime, especially when it comes to the drug cartels and all the immigrant gangs running around New York City or whatever town he happens to flip through his pumpkin infected brain that day. So I've been looking at it, and I'm, like some of these things are real. Like I think violent crime in certain places really is an issue, right? I don't think that Donald Trump has the foggiest notion of how to do it, and everything he does seems to contradict what he says he wants to do. Like if you want to actually fight the drug war, bombing boats in the Caribbean is not only not a good way to do that, it's actually hurts efforts to mitigate drug supply to America. So okay, we got some and this is where my issue is. None of the things he wants to do that he says he wants to do are actually backed up by the things he says he wants to do, or by the things he actually does. He says he wants to bring down prices and take care of inflation, but then he's slapping tariffs all over the world, which makes the prices go up. So I've been like wondering, is there some sort of unifying structure that makes everything he says make sense? Is there a prism you can look at things through and go, oh, well, if that's what his goal is, then what he's doing actually makes a lot of sense. And there's something called the replacement theory, which is this idea, you've probably heard of it, that in the current version of it by the MAGAs and the Elon Musks and the Stephen Millers of the world, we're inviting immigrants over here to vote illegally so that the Democrats can stay in power. This is our sneaky little way of staying in power, is having all these immigrants come over, and then they're just going to take over, and pretty soon we're not going to have white culture anymore. We're not going to have white people anymore. We're all going to become persons of color or whatever. I mean, they don't say it out loud. They'll just say replacement, as a substitute for all of that. But it's their little racist code word that they use. And when you start looking at things, if that, like, so let's say you believe in that theory and you are trying to stop it, what would you do? How would you act? What would you do as president to prevent this replacement from happening? And so I spent some time last night on several different AIs, and I asked them questions like, if you wanted to fight the drug war, what would you do? And versus what would Trump do? And I just started looking through it all and combing through it all, and every single time was like the things he would do were completely inconsistent with the goals he claims he wants to achieve. Unless you look at the goal he won't claim he wants to achieve. When you look at the goal he won't claim he wants to achieve, stopping replacement, and I'm not saying that replacement theory is real or that there is really such a thing. I'm saying in his and Stephen Miller's sick and twisted brains, if they think it's real and they wanted to stop it, they would do exactly what they're doing. Do you follow me? So let me got some comments here. I'm going to look through. Trump is a piece of bleep, which I agree with that. He's a racist, I think. Am I a racist or is Trump a racist? I, I think he means Trump is racist. He wants to improve these things for himself. He's a rapist. Or wait. That is how he works. He never match what you say. Bombing boats with drugs in them. Okay, so what do I'll get into that in a minute. But your idea here, your argument, if you know, you can like hear this out. Your argument is either we let the drugs into the country or we bomb the boats. In your argument here, you're not allowing for the fact that we prevent the drugs from getting into the country and we don't bomb the boats. Like we can accomplish the goal without doing that. But how does it hurt the issue is one, most of the intelligence we get that tells us what boats have drugs on them and who's doing it and everything like that is from flipping the actual smugglers. It's through interdiction. We have Coast Guard boats pull up and figure and people get arrested and then they flip for lighter sentences because these are low end guys and then we get the higher end guys. We get that information through human intel, and that human intel often comes from interdicting those boats. Number two, there's something called the Five Eyes, which is like our international network of spies, so to speak. All right. And a lot of our intelligence on how drug boats are operating comes from that. And the United Kingdom and Canada both have like stopped sharing information regarding this sort of thing because they don't want to be involved in murder. And you know, we can talk all you want about national laws or whether or not they're foreign terrorist organizations or anything, but they're not internationally recognized terrorist organizations, and the rest of the world sees this as murder because according to international law it is, and they don't want to participate in those murders, so they're pulling our intelligence. They're pulling us out of their intelligence briefs. So now we're losing that intelligence and we're losing our own on the ground intelligence, and so we know less about what drugs are coming over here, and we could have interdicted anyway if they were actually coming here and if they did actually have drugs. So I just like kind of reject the idea that there's a false binary here where bombing boats doesn't hurt and bombing boats means less drugs, because neither of those statements is true. I say what I want to be a size 4, but actually what I want is to eat myself into becoming a Jabba the Hutt and to be worshipped for it. That is how drug. Yes. I think the argument is about milk. There is a different argument to be had about that. But I think if you're looking at solving my point here is not to get into this semantic debate. My point here is that if you're actually trying to solve the drug problem, bombing boats is not the way you're going to go about it. Oh, you forgot an apostrophe. I'll forgive you this one time, Kitty. AI has old people in a chokehold. I don't know what that means. It's hard to believe that you were born female. Okay, I don't know what that means. Is this like some attempt to use like transgender as an insult? Like I'm not transgender, but if I have a transgender nephew, and I don't see why you using transgender people as an insult just shows what a terrible kind of person you are. You have a choice on whether or not to make that statement. They don't have a choice as to whether or not they're transgender. Are you afraid of getting eaten by cannibalistic midgets? No, I'm not. Although there's probably a good pun in there somewhere. Uh, only in Libla. I don't. This is like Republican MAGA comebacks are so unimaginative to the U.S. government. Yes, the U.S. government does not apply to England or Canada. It does not apply in international waters. The U.S. government only applies within the U.S. I mean, like, do you realize there's a world out there that does not abide by the like Trump is not the emperor of the world. Neither ID. Okay, so yeah, they've been waiting for me. By the way, anybody that's here now that was here the other day, I'm really sorry. I have long COVID and I was feeling pretty sick already. I'm just glad I didn't puke on camera because that was pretty close. Liberals making joke is the joke. Okay. George Carlin was a joke, I guess. Anyone who disagrees with you is MAGA? No. I didn't say anybody that disagrees with me is MAGA. Where did I say anybody who disagrees with me is MAGA? I would actually say I pretty much, even my wife, like everybody alive disagrees with me on something. And if I've ever met anybody that agreed with me on everything, they would scare the crap out of me. So no, it's not everybody who disagrees with me is MAGA. This is just everybody who disagrees with Trump is a liberal or something, you know? I disagree with Trump on almost everything. Trans women are men, okay. You know, you can state things that aren't true. That doesn't make them true. All right, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go to the, I made this dashboard to explain what I'm talking about with Trump's policy objectives, his stated objectives, and what he actually does. And I'll go through that, and then you guys can all type your comments that are completely ignoring what I'm saying, and then I'll come back here. But I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to walk through, like, what would you do if you wanted to accomplish these things? And I'm not blowing you off. I can't see the comments when I'm on the other screen that I'm sharing right now. So just hold your comments until I come back. Or yell at me all you want, but I won't respond until I come back. Plus, I like to be able to have a flow of thought. So this is the methodology. This is policy objectives, stated versus actual. And, you know, my mom taught me, look at what people do, not what they say. And I think that's a good way to look at what's happening with Trump right now. Don't, you know, like he said he had never heard of Project 2025, and he's basically executing it. So look at what people do, not what people say. And if you want to make it about Biden and say the same thing, go ahead. If, you know, like, however it needs to align in your head to where you can figure out what it means. So Trump's methodology, the Occam's razor test. For each stated objective, we, and by we, I mean me and the various AIs that I employed, because I wanted to, like, not just lock into one AI. Wanted to see what they all got. And, you know, you can knock AI if you want, but at least look at the facts. Don't just try and find some way to wiggle out from the facts. Policies that would help achieve it, policies that are counterproductive to it. So I'm looking at one, what would you do? Are the things you're doing actually achieving it? And also, are you ignoring things that would help it? And also, are you doing things that actually hurt it? So for everything that you do that helps that policy, I gave +1. For everything that he does that hurts that policy, I gave a -1, or that ignores doing something that would help, I gave a -1. All right, so he wants to improve the economy. He says he wants to improve the economy. The first thing that would improve the economy is infrastructure investment. He has not, in his first 4 years, it was always infrastructure week. Remember? We kept going through infrastructure week over and over again. Then Joe Biden passed infrastructure. Now he's not doing anything on infrastructure except for occasionally taking credit for Biden's infrastructure as the projects start. But he has never done anything on infrastructure. The strengthen the safety net. What I mean by this is there's something called economic stabilizers. Those are things like unemployment insurance, food stamps or SNAP benefits, Medicaid, things that, like, if you lost your job, that kind of catch you before you hit rock bottom. And they're automatic stabilizers that are encoded into the law so that you don't have to rush and do something. These are things that were instituted after the Great Depression to prevent another Great Depression. And so he's not strengthening those safety nets at all. You would want to lower healthcare costs. He keeps saying things like about, now it's the Medicare medical savings account, which won't lower healthcare costs. And that's not just me. That's virtually every medical economist that I have talked to. I have not met one that has said healthcare savings accounts are gonna save the day. There's just too many very, very good reasons they're going to end up hurting. Education funding, he's actually trying to take away education funding and support unions and workers, which I don't know how actively he's stopping that, but certainly he's not doing anything to help it. So the things you would do if you wanted to do it, he's not doing any of those. Counterproductive things that he is doing, massive tax cuts for the wealthy, that increases the deficit, right? We've got the One Big Beautiful Bill Act adds $2 trillion to the deficit. Tariffs, rates, consumer prices. He's constantly bragging about how much money the tariffs are bringing in, as though that's outside money being brought over here. What he's actually doing is he is taxing poor people and giving the money to the rich people. Effectively, that's what it is. That's what a tariff does. Now, I see some people occasionally try and say, well, why are you okay with, the corporate tax rates, but not this? And there's two things. One, tariffs are a tax on cost. So they actually can mean that you have negative money after the tariffs if you just eat the tariffs, if you just pay the tariffs. You can lose money. Corporate taxes are taxes on profits. So you literally cannot have a loss if you're making a profit. That's kind of mutually exclusive. You know what I'm saying? So there's a big difference there. Plus the pass-through rate. There's something called a pass-through rate, which is an indication of how much the tax that's being assessed gets passed through to the customer, to the end customer. And yes, corporate taxes can be passed through, and the average is around 20 to 40% of the taxes end up getting passed through. The average for tariffs is 80 to 100%. So tariffs are worse. And at some point, rich people have to pay taxes too. You can't just always say, well, if you can't, the only people that shouldn't pay taxes are rich people. That's what they would have you believe. The rich people. When the rich people are saying, no, you have to pay more taxes, so I don't have to. You really have to think about what your, priorities are. Cut Medicaid SNAP when she's, done. He's trying to end the ACA subsidies. If you do that, that is going to have such a dramatic impact if they don't pass those subsidies. And I don't think people are recognizing it. I don't think people realize not just about the healthcare, not just about the insurance premium, the actual economy is going to get blasted by this. What are you going to do? Like if you have your premiums go up $1,000, that means that you have $1,000 less to spend elsewhere. So now you're not buying the movie tickets. Now you're not going to the baseball game. Now you're not, going out to eat. So all those other aspects of the economy start getting clobbered when you take when the subsidies come out. And there's something economists refer to as a what's the word? All of a sudden I had the word in my brain and now I dropped it. But it's like a compounder. If you spend $1, if the government spends $1 on a poor person or a middle class person, it has a higher impact on the economy than if it's a poor person. And I think for healthcare costs, it's like $1.50 for every dollar that they spend. You get an increase in the economy. For tax cuts for the wealthy, it's like 20 cents. And so you're taking out that money out of the economy to get back 20 cents. So for every $1.50 that we lose in the ACA subsidies, we're getting 20 cents. 20 cents on $1.50 is not a good deal. Crypto reserve. He's trying to get people into the crypto, and that's volatile and it's speculative, and it's going to end up costing a lot of poor people money, just like his little meme stock. He's got his little meme coin now, and people are going to lose money on that. You looked at his meme stock lately? Remember how people were saying, oh, he's making all this money? Well, now it's like worth a quarter of what it was when it went corporate or when it went public. Mass deportations, that causes a labor shortage. And we'll get into that more later, but that just the labor shortage, the sucking out of the labor market, that means that the people that were relying on that labor can no longer stay in business. And that means the people that were servicing them can no longer stay in business. So Bob has his strawberry farm and Fred drives the truck that delivers strawberries. Well, Bob loses his job and Fred loses his job. We're undermining our trade relations with all these, like with every country in the world, and you're getting these new trade deals, right? But all these new trade deals, they have two things in common. One, they end up with higher tariffs, which means we're paying more money for this trade deal, and they're promising to invest money at some future date. Well, Trump's only going to be president for 3 more years, and none of these future dates are like most of this money is not going to be spent within the next 3 years. So they're just saying, sure, go ahead, tax your own people. We'll give you $5 trillion in investments in 5 years when you're not president anymore. Like he's being a fool. He keeps going and buying the emperor's clothes from every country in the world and walking around naked thinking that he's triumphant. He's undermining trade relations. Okay. And then government dysfunction and chaos. The whole just insanity of the way this government is working with constant lawsuits, judicial activists and all these kinds of nut jobs just running about being nut jobs in his own administration. All that hurts our credibility, and all of that, we've already had one credit our credit rating lowered once, and could happen again. All right, so I've gone through that one. I'm going to go through and look at the comments and see if there is any worthy comments. Yeah, it's mostly what the Coast Guard does nowadays is interdict drug boats. Yeah, that's the other thing. As most of these boats, they never could have come over here. Now we're finding out that they weren't even trying to come here. And so it's like there's so many levels that the whole you just want drugs to come in here, like there's so much wrong with that argument that really anybody that makes it should just be embarrassed. Okay. I'm actually rebooting some of these. How about a joke to lighten up the mood? Okay, since yesterday was Pirates Day, what is a pirate's favorite Star Wars character? R2D2. Why do mermaids wear shells? I don't know. Cover up their boobs? I don't know. I'm imagining there's like an actual punchline there, but I can't figure it out. What is? Yeah, it's just I just once it starts, every argument just goes into like transgender stuff. Carlin made a joke about woke. Okay, well, that's funny since he died before the whole thing started. Okay, hey buddy, how do you like we see 6 more boats? I really honestly, how this is what you said. Hey buddy, how do you like how we see 6 more boats and Venezuela yesterday? That's not even a sentence. That's not even a cogent thought. How am I supposed to respond to that? Why do I have to translate everything from MAGA into English? Trump is freezing all the funding to the globalists. Are you a globalist? If you are, get out of America. Funny. So there's your anti-Semitism for the day. They're both sides of the same coin. I don't know what you know very well, but I've actually worked. I've had jobs and worked literally in training AIs, so I do know something about this. Okay. Whatever happened to that dementia patient? You remember the one that loved sniffing? Yeah, see, so this has nothing to everything just stay focused, dudes. Stay focused. Can you talk about the thing that we're talking about? Why? I mean, Joe Biden consoled his grandchildren at their father's funeral. What a horrible person. But does that okay, so this looks like it might lead to a cogent thought. But does that make any sense to you as an idea that spending on consumption makes us richer? I don't think consumption is spending. They're the same thing. But consumption does not make us richer. Consumption is a measure of how comfortable we are in spending money. GDP is composed of consumption, investment, Consumption is all spending. Investment is like new business. Then we have government, which is government spending. And then there's net exports, which isn't really part of GDP per se. It's more a balancer, you know. It's the number is relatively small in general. So consumption is a part of GDP. And if you start peeling back the numbers there, then you start to see some interesting things. Some things that we're spending more money on than we used to. Credit card spending, like the consumption doesn't differ between credit card spending and not credit card spending. But credit card debt is going through the roof. The number of people that are late on their credit card payments are going through the roof. And so those things, which I will say have started going up since before Trump, but have gotten worse under Trump. Like, I think sometimes we get too busy on, trying to blame the current president for everything. There are underlying things behind the credit card debt beyond either president or either party or even national politics. And this is when I say we need to start looking at solutions and stop looking at blame. Like, why are we so in debt? Did you know that our credit card debt as a nation is greater than the national debt? Like, that's actually the bigger issue. But can you explain tax incidents and to explain why you oppose sales tax tariffs and you demand the Dems do? This is too complicated of a question. I don't know what you mean by tax incidents, but sales tax and tariffs are two different things. In general, I don't like regressive taxes, and they're both regressive taxes. But tariffs are taxes on businesses that are importing things, and so then that can actually destroy an entire it can destroy a business because the prices are too high to sell. That means that the people they employ get laid off and they lose their jobs. That means that they could lose their homes. And so it has this domino effect versus the sales tax means you just pay 7 cents more for, the $1 thing that you just bought. I don't like either. They are very different. And I don't think it has to be like Republican or Democrat. I don't like tariffs. Like, can't that just stand alone? Why does that have to become a party line thing? And if you talk, most macro economists that are like valid macroeconomists will tell you that tariffs are a terrible thing. Okay. So, all right. Somebody's hearing things that conflict, at least I'll give you this much credit, Bulldog, if you're still here, that cognitive dissonance is like that feeling of discomfort when new information hits your pre-existing concept and you feel discomfortable about it. So if you feel uncomfortable, you're doing better than most MAGAs, because most MAGAs won't even acknowledge that there's a conflict between the reality that they think they knew and the reality that exists. So good on you for recognizing that there is something else. George, I don't know who George was. You talking about George Carlin? Yeah, I think by like I think before, like, he died before the whole woke thing became a thing. Like, it was a thing in The Wire where it was like what it originally meant, where like stay woke, dude. Like when it was still just black people being aware of how white privilege and things like that have an effect on society. And, before just, woke means anything that a MAGA disagrees with. That's from a phone. I don't know what's from a phone. I'm sorry. I think I missed something. MAGA crawls are simple creatures. No, globalist is anti-Semitism. Uh, the Pentagon has an AI selecting targets. Um, yeah, I've heard about that. I haven't looked into it yet. All right, so I'm being told that not get distracted and to keep going. All right, so I think I'll do that. Let's go back to number 2, policy number 2. Okay, this one, boy, we thought we were getting things stirred up. Okay, let's say you wanted to solve the immigration crisis. And to me, I agree that immigration is one of the top things that our government should be looking in on. And I'm not just talking about, oh, the number of illegals that are over here, which is a hyperbolic number, always expressed even more hyperbolically. Because how you define who's illegal and all of that is really up in the air. And a lot of it is deliberate lies, and a lot of it is just lies that are repeated that people believe. But one of the issues is people are always saying, if you want to come over here, I'm fine with that, just do it the right way. But when you peel back that curtain and you ask them, what is the legal way? What legal way do you prefer they take over? They come over. All right, now there's just briefly, there are certain ways somebody can come over here legally. One is, like on an occupational thing. I'm not going to go through all the different kinds of visas, but like you can come over here and get a job. But you have to have the job before you come over here. Those jobs, for the most part, require bachelor's degrees at least. There are some countries where you're not even eligible to come over here on those visas. And Trump just expanded that list to even more. So this is like, if you want to put it into perspective, like 99% of sub-Saharan Africa has no legal, realistic pathway unless they have family over here. That's another, the most common way is if you have family over here. But 98%, 99% of people in sub-Saharan Africa that don't have family over here has no way to come over here. There just isn't a way. So when you say come over the legal way, what legal way? Like, learn what immigration law is. And we can talk, but if you're from like Norway, for instance, like 50% of the people there can come over here legally. And if you're from like Nigeria, you might be able to come over here legally in like 10 or 20 years. Here, let me put it this way. If you're from Nigeria and you went to school at MIT and got a master's degree and you had like a 3.9 GPA, and another guy from Norway went to MIT and got a master's degree and had a 3.9 GPA. So you're on merit, you are exactly the same. But the guy from Norway can probably get a job and get over here within a year. The Nigerian guy might be able to get over here in 20 years. It has nothing to do with merit. There is racial discrimination embedded in the laws. And not only is it already embedded, it's being distilled so that it's even worse. So when people say, I'm okay for you, coming over here as long as you're doing it the legal way, it's like in the 1940s, if somebody said, I'm okay with black people voting as long as they do it the legal way. Because the laws were, the racism was embedded in the law, even if it didn't say the word race. It just said, oh, you have to pass this test. And then different people were given different tests. So when you're talking about coming over the right way, you can't have that conversation without having the conversation about what is the right way. You can say, they come over here like my grandfather did, or my great grandfather did, or my ancestors did. You know, my ancestors came over here before there was a country. But most people, all the way up until especially Caucasian people, the way their ancestors came over here, if they came over, if their ancestry goes back 3 or 4 generations, their ancestors came over here the exact same way. They got off a boat, they signed their name, and they walked in. That's it. There was no visa process that they had to apply for. There were no quotas that they had to worry about. Like, we did have open borders for like the first 150 years of this country. People don't seem to know that nowadays. Like, we have no idea what our own history is. So if you wanted to solve the immigration crisis, one thing you have to do is look at what the legal way is. You have to open up more legal ways. There has to be a quicker asylum processing. Go talk to, if you know an asylum officer, talk to them someday. I know one, and I asked her to come on the show and talk about it, but she's not allowed to by law. But the whole asylum process for the people that work in the asylum system, it's really, really horrible working there now, because everything is so backed up and everything is so politicized. And especially like now from the top, they're like told they can only give so many people asylum. Trump shut down asylum for everybody that's not a white South African. We have to look at our work visa programs. Like, we have an agriculture system that depends on immigrant labor, but where the process, the actual legal process, is so expensive that the average small farmer can't pay for the legal process, so they hire undocumented workers. That in turn lowers the money that domestic labor makes. So it's bad for everybody. It's bad for the farmer, it's bad for the immigrant, and it's bad for the domestic worker. If you want to solve the problem, and I'm really not trying to be critical of anyone or anything here, I'm just saying, if you wanted to solve the problem, you should look at how you can make it easier for Midwestern farmers and Texas farmers that are small farmers to be able to pay legally for immigrant labor. And then if they can pay legally for immigrant labor, then that raises the floor. And it means that all the domestic people that are working here, that wage deprecation doesn't hit them. So it's good for them. The farmers get to keep going. Did you know that right this year, 1,000 private farms are expected to declare bankruptcy, and we're already like almost there. This is not just like a hypothetical. We've lost what is it? We had 1.5 million small farms in 1980. We're down to like 1.1 million. We've lost 400,000 small farms in the last 45 years. Now we could lose another 400,000 over the next 5 years because of the economic policies, including mass deportations. Going to just kill so many farms. We need to fund immigration courts instead of stalking ICE out there for people that are literally trying to come over here legally. And in the actual legal process of doing what they are legally required to do, arresting them and deporting them. How can you say, come over here legally, and then arrest them when they are going through that exact legal process you told them to go through? We need to look at, and this is what we'll get onto later, we need to look at what is causing immigration with an E. Why are people leaving those countries? And in spite of what you heard, they aren't coming over here so that they can be abused by Donald Trump. They're coming over here because they aren't safe where they're at. They're either not safe because they don't have protection from gangs, the cartels, which we're supposed to be fighting. Who do you think they're killing? Like, how can you be talking about these cartels, but somehow all the people fleeing them are cartel members? That's like accusing the Jews that tried to flee Germany of being Nazis. Address root causes and then employer enforcement, stop exploitation. There's, especially like with the corporate firms, or I think didn't Donald Trump get busted for hiring undocumented workers also? Like, we need to really look at the whole problem. To me, this one is, I don't know what the comments are saying right now, but like, this is a problem that's been 40 years in the making, multiple presidents and both parties and multiple Congresses. Like, we have not acted on this, and now it's getting worse. And it's like all of a sudden we want to say it's all one guy or another guy's fault. Let's look at solution-based politics and not blame-based politics. What can we do to solve the immigration crisis? And mass deportations does not solve it. And here, I'll go into some ways where it's actually counterproductive again. I hope I'm not making you think, because I know you're not used to it, but like, flex those muscles. Okay, when you close legal pathways, it forces illegal crossings. So let's say, for instance, there is an asylum lawyer I talked to. He had a mother as a client that came over here with her two children. Well, with her one child. Her older son had been murdered by the drug cartels because he wouldn't join the cartels. Her younger son was like 2 years younger. And so the cartel came to her older son's funeral. And they pointed the imaginary gun at the back of his head during her older son's funeral and says, boom, and like did the fake trigger pull, telling her if he didn't join the cartel, he was next. So she went home, grabbed what they could, and they walked across half a continent to get to the border and cross the border and request asylum. Do you think that somebody that's going to do that because they already murdered her one son and are threatening to murder her other son, do you think she's going to go, oh, well, the border's closed, I quit, I'm just going to go back and get my son murdered? Like, they're going to try to find another way. And when you try to find another way, that means you're actually opening up the way for the coyotes to cash in. The coyotes, the MAGAs are always complaining about closing legal pathways. When you shut off all legal pathways, you're empowering coyotes. You're telling people the only way to not get murdered by the cartel is to sneak over the border. And so your options are sneak over the border or get murdered. What are you going to do? When you end parole programs, it pushes to irregular routes, the same thing. And I see too many MAGAs that seem to be under the impression that parole is like a punitive thing, like when you get out of prison and you're on parole. This is not like the same kind of thing. Parole is not a punitive thing. It means that you are here with the permission of the government, but you are not yet a documented work or documented person in the sense that your asylum case hasn't been cleared, and or you haven't gotten your green card yet. Like, you're here legally, but you're here temporarily legally. When you the mass deportations, they're expensive and they don't address demand, and they also hurt the economy. So then terminate TPS for long-term residents. He terminated TPS. This one to me is like temporary protective status. There was this thing, I think it's called CBP or something like that. I forget what it, but there were people that everybody was saying, if you want to come over here legally, do it the right way. And people were trying to point out, according to law, you have to be over here to request asylum. So what Biden did is, for certain countries, he allowed this kind of pre-screening thing for like Cuba and Argentina and a couple other countries. And they would say they wanted to come over here and request asylum. And then they would have to provide like more screening than most people get, like biometrics and stuff like that. They would prove who they were. They had to prove they had a sponsor here. And then so that, and so that they wouldn't take up any taxpayer money, they had to have somebody living here that would be their sponsor. They had to pay for their own plane ticket, and they had to pay like a fee on top of that. And the MAGA politicians turned around and they made that into, oh, Joe Biden is bringing over illegals in the dark of the night. These were asylum seekers that had been pre-screened, and they were just coming over here to be on a temporary status until their asylum cases could be heard. And you can't get your asylum case heard unless you're over here. Like, how do you, like, I don't know how, do MAGAs not even bother understanding how the system they are so critical of works? So I'm going to go back here. I'm assuming there's comments. Was there anything worth reading there, Kitty? Skynet is here. I don't know what Skynet is. It's a direct result of those completely backward immigration. Tariff? Did you mean tariff policies? Now that would be interesting if there was like a tariff policy and we just did all governing by tariff cards. I assume you're speaking into your phone for the comments. We create the problem. So I'm not making fun of you. I'm just thinking tariff policies kind of sounds funny. Like funny, haha, like the idea of tariff policies. Yeah. And we really have created the problem. And that's what I've been going over previously this week, is going through like Latin American history and showing just how badly we messed up the nations which are now fleeing, and that we've got such a huge part in it. We broke South America, and now it's our job to fix it. And instead we're going to AI labor. AI is definitely, like AI took my job, so I'm with you. And then I got a job working on AI, so it's like, you got to roll with the punches. We're full. How are we full? What does that even mean? We're full? Like, you can't like fit anybody else in? What does we're full mean? If we're full, why is the MAGA party like telling people that they need to reproduce? There's a reason for that. There's an answer for that, and it's coming up. So yeah, we could do like an involuntary exchange, and like send people in red hats to other parts of the world so they have to learn what they're talking about and actually learn what life is like. Like I don't anyway. 85% of America is empty. Yeah, and it's the 85% the MAGAs live in because nobody wants to be with them. Okay. Stop drugs and cartels. So let's go on to the next topic. Let's say you wanted to stop the drugs and the cartels. What would your policy actually be? One, you would want to target cartel operations and finances. Have you noticed that with um all the rhetoric about, the ICE arrests and everything like that, you very rarely hear anything about actual cartel people, like the actual violent ones aren't the ones being arrested. There's been a couple of operations that probably would have been done anyway, and you're taking, like with all this focus on getting the nanny that has been there for 27 years and wrote a bad check 12 years ago. Like instead of like all the focus on her, that's all manpower. That's all things that is not going to actually getting the bad guys. So we're detracting from the actual stated goal just to reach Stephen Miller's number. Like we're hurting the country. You would want to do drug, contribute to, excuse me, to drug treatment campaigns. Did you hear they're opening up a new clinic called the Donald Trump Jr. Cocaine Clinic? Just kidding. You haven't heard it because it's not happening. He's still doing drugs and his daddy doesn't care. Intelligence operation on trafficking networks. Where is that? Where are we actually trying to stop drug trafficking? This is if you are actually trying to do that, shouldn't we be gearing up those operations instead of gearing up the nabbing the illegals operation? We should be having cooperation with source countries. The only cooperation we're having with source countries is pardoning Juan Orlando Hernandez convicted drug smuggler. We should be focusing enforcement on actual traffickers. Most of our, like 95% of what we're doing has nothing to do with drug traffickers. The Korean guy that came over here when he was 7, he had a one drug conviction from when he was, like from 20 years ago. And he served his sentence. And he got a Purple Heart. Now, here's the interesting thing about this guy. When you serve in the military, if you're like, he had a green card and he legally served in the military. And if you serve in the military as a legal immigrant, afterwards, you can naturalize. Like that's one of the rewards of your service. He just never went through the trouble of filling out the paperwork. So he was still technically a Korean citizen, and he's got PTSD and he's got drug problems and stuff like that. So he's like not exactly thinking, oh, I need to go and get my citizenship status taken care of. Probably never occurred to him that he could be deported because he's lived here his whole life. Like, you don't think much about what your life was like when you were 6, right? So this is the only life he's ever known. So then he serves his sentence, and then afterwards he gets put on this list to deport. But it's like this list is not like once you're on it, they put you on a plane the next day and ship you out. He was a low level on that list, and so he was allowed to stay by the government. He was not here illegally. He wasn't. MAGAs make it want to sound like he was like a fugitive from justice for all these years. He was here. He was here 100% with the permission of the government. The deportment, and he, as long as he met certain conditions of his parole, he was allowed to stay here. And sometimes for a while that included wearing an ankle bracelet. It required weekly visits and routine visits. It was at one of these visits where he was again complying to stay in this country. He was at this visit when when ICE agents told him, either you deport yourself or we're going to detain and deport you. So he self-deported to a country he had no recollection of. A guy who actually took 2 bullets for our country and who was no danger to anybody. He wasn't a cartel member. He wasn't trafficking drugs. He wasn't a danger to anybody, except Stephen Miller has to get his numbers up. All right, so you wouldn't understand. I don't know what I wouldn't understand about the Honduras release. What I do know about Juan Orlando Hernandez is that the investigation into him lasted for 10 years. It started under Biden, continued under Trump for his first entire term. Then it continued under Trump. I know that the attorneys that worked on the case were actually working on a real case. They had video evidence, they had recording evidence, they had logs that had his initials. He initialed in the logs. I know that the trial lasted like 3 days, and 3 days, and the jury settled in less than 1. And for the amount of evidence, that was like extremely fast. This was an airtight, open and shut case that included things like him ordering the Honduras military to go on military operations against the Sinaloa cartel's rivals. That's the one that he was working with. So maybe you need to look. Maybe you don't understand the Honduras thing. Like it's like, why do MAGAs always think that they know? Like Fox News is not telling you about these things. Did you know that there was a 10-year investigation? Do you know what the evidence was against him? This was not a political trial. This was just a bought and paid for pardon. Border crossing numbers are irrelevant because like this is okay. We have no idea how many pounds of whatever are crossing, because it's not like we're sitting there, oh, you've got a bag there filled with drugs. Here, can I weigh that and then I'll give it back to you and let you go? That was never happening. Do you think the Border Patrol was doing that? Why are you asking stupid questions? So leftist. Yeah, the military guy being deported is very sad. Yeah, I mean, that one, I'm a veteran, and actually I was serving at the same time. I wasn't, like Panama. I was in Italy. But that one like really just makes me sad. And this man, I mean, he had PTSD, he got wounded. We need to do and same thing with the guy from Afghanistan. We need to do a better job of taking people that fought for this country. We need to do a better job of taking care of their mental health. And this is another thing. I mean, when like we should all be able to agree on that, right? Like our soldiers that have fought for this country need to have their mental health taken care of when they get back. They see things and they do things that are hard for the human brain to cope with. We should be helping them. And I don't care what your party is. I don't see or what your thoughts on Biden or Trump are. Like, we should be a nation that has at least some compassion and mercy towards the people that put their lives on the line for it. Yeah, he didn't fill out the proper paperwork. That's what it was. You're right. But, like, come on. We're going to deport somebody that took bullets for this country over a paperwork error? Yeah, I don't know what to tell you, but I'm giving you valid criticism. If you can't process it, that's on you. He did more for the country than Trump, and he's being treated like. He was a traitor? Okay, is the law when Donald Trump breaks it? It seems like people that quote that are really okay. Is the law for the 1,500 people that he pardoned who tried to overthrow the country? When is the law, and when is the law something that can be broken? Like, you're like all upset about the law when it comes to a paperwork error by a guy that took took 2 bullets for this country. But a guy walks into the Capitol building and wipes his own feces on the wall because he doesn't like who won the election, then that's just, well, that was a protest. Nobody is against the war on drugs, but why would anybody be against an effective war on drugs? The question is not whether or not we're against drugs. The question is not if you're against drugs, is this the way to go about it? Hi. V triggers. Okay, so, all right. Boy. Trump took a bullet. Okay. He did not technically take a bullet. He may have taken a fragment of something. Or he may have taken a razor blade to his ear like a wrestler. Where do the majority of drugs in this country come from? Most of them come over the southern border. If you're talking about fentanyl, I think about drugs in general, this is true. Most of the drugs in this country come in through ports of entry by U.S. citizens, or they come in through shipping crates. And only like 2% of those get inspected. This is an issue that this is like a perfect example. Like, why aren't we inspecting those? Why is that not the focus? Like, if you want to fight the war on drugs, why are we not doing the common sense solutions instead of blowing up boats that aren't even coming to America? Okay, but you know what I did do? On the day that happened, I went and I donated money to the fireman's family who was murdered. Did you do that? I have empathy. Do you? What about when the Democratic people, the Democrats in Minnesota were murdered? Did you have empathy? When Paul Pelosi was attacked, did you ask about empathy while Republican leadership was making jokes about it? What I'm joking about is not Trump taking a bullet or being an assassination attempt. It's the idea that he took a bullet. He literally did not take a bullet. Like, there was no bullet lodged in him. The what I laugh at is the way that MAGA makes it want to seem like he was nearly dead and then he stood up. Teddy Roosevelt took a bullet and finished his speech. There's never even been a bullet found. Boo-hoo, Layla. I don't even know what that means. Boo-hoo, LMAO. Yes, it was coming to the country more. Oh, you're talking about the boat? The boat that the admiral, when ordered it sunk, said wasn't coming to the country? Do you have information that Admiral Bradley didn't? Where are they headed? Well, usually they've been headed. Most of the boats, like 90% of the drug boats that are coming out of Venezuela, are heading either to the Caribbean or to Europe. These are things that, like, if you were curious, you could actually look up. Like, they were not going to get drugs, and if they were coming here, we could have interdicted them. Like, it's not like, oh, if we don't kill them, like Donald Trump's out there, for every boat we got, that saved 25,000 American lives. Like, that's nonsense. If we know where the boats are, and we have a battleship in the area, why can't we interdict? When we rescued the 2 survivors, why didn't we just bring them back and try them? Instead of asking sophomoric questions that have answers that you don't know the answer to because you don't have the courage to look them up and find out, why don't you listen to the answers then? They were the first one was not headed to the United States. We know this because Admiral Bradley said so. Hello from Polska. Hey, I have some good friends from Polska. I don't know if that's the way you're supposed to say it. You guys have good food, by the way. Underrated country for food. I think it was pickled something or other. Where I lived in Chicago was like near Little Poland or Little Warsaw or whatever they call it. And they had all these Polish grocery stores, and I got some really good Polish food. By pure saturation, I don't know what pure saturation means. Do they just like pour it in the ground and then it just comes up on? What does pure saturation mean? Okay. He was nearly dead. He wasn't nearly dead. He got up. And 2 inches, 2 millimeters to the right? What? Do you know how much a millimeter is? He got the outside of his ear ticked by a bullet fragment. If there was a bullet fragment. It's like there's no, I wish they would release some sort of report on what happened. I don't think it was staged. I'm not one of the people that says it was staged. I believe real bullets were fired. I just don't think his life was ever really in danger. I don't, well, maybe his life was like he could have been shot, but he didn't nearly die. He didn't take a bullet. Why do you need to inject hyperbole into it? Like, it's bad. Somebody shot at him. Why do you have to be hyperbolic about it and make him sound like he's some sort of war hero? And while you're trying to use the fact that he was shot at to deny somebody was actually shot taking a bullet for this country. We can have a civil conversation, Americans fighting each other for at least. Why are you using, like, you say we can have a civil conversation, then you call people illegal? How can, like, that's not a civil thing to say. If you want to have a civil conversation, then be civil. I'm being civil. I'm responding honestly to your questions and your comments. You are using slurs on my channel. They actually go to Europe, dude. Like, don't. Why do MAGAs always like, if you tell them something they don't know, they like, you have a whole Google machine there on your little phone or laptop or whatever you're using. Look it up. Where do you think the drugs to Europe come from? What they do is the boats, the little boats, they go to the islands, and then in the islands they get on bigger boats, and then the bigger boats go to Europe and Africa. Do you think they grow cocaine in England? Do you think they don't have cocaine in England? Well, yeah, I think that that's part of what we need to do, right? We're only inspecting 2% of them. This is what I'm saying. We need to inspect them like that. But to inspect every single one is impossible. Just ask Greg Abbott. So how do we do it? Like, I think this is what we need. We need solution-oriented conversations, not blame-oriented conversations. Why do we have 8 tractor trailers? That's the question you need to answer. Has Donald Trump done anything about that? You know, I mean, like, this is, if you want to fight the war on drugs, what would you be doing? And would you be doing exactly this right now? Would this be your top priority? Would boats that aren't even coming to the United States, would that be your focus? Would that be your entire strategy? Okay. Do you think I can illegal? No. What does that matter? I am saying we need to change our laws so that people can come over here legally. Do you understand? Like, when you say, do you think I can illegally enter Mexico and set up my business there without paying taxes? That's the opposite of what I am saying. I am saying make it so people can come over here legally and then work for American businesses and pay taxes. So, all right. Do you think the only way to get drug smuggled here is if the boats land in America? I think that bombing the boats doesn't help prevent drugs from coming over here at all. And I think bombing the boats has hurt our fight in the drugs coming over here at all. That I don't understand. Like, this is a pretty simple concept, right? Like, I don't understand what you think is you're owning me over here. Like, what is your rebuttal? No, I don't think the only way to get drugs smuggled in here is, are you talking to me or are you talking to somebody else? Maybe you're talking to somebody else. And I'm just, anyway. Sorry if you're talking to somebody else. Sometimes it's hard to see who's talking to who. Well, there's like 1,000 comments. And, you know, like, not everyone you can read every, like, and a lot of the comments don't even come across in English. But you said, you makes you believe Trump faked his assassination. That's not even a sentence. I read the whole thing and it still doesn't make sense. And it's still nothing I ever said. I literally said the opposite of that. I said, I think the assassination attempt was real. I told you I gave money to the fireman's family that died. And you're over here accusing me of saying Trump made it up. Are you even listening to what I'm saying? And you're accusing me of not reading your whole comments. All right, so let's go to the next one. Okay. So we're going to finish up on this. Or did I? Okay, I already did that. All right, so now he's always talking about how he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. Right? What is he actually doing to promote peace? And I know I'm going to get some stupid comments on this, but whatever. strengthen alliances. That's what he should be doing. He's only trying to strengthen alliances with autocracies, with right-wing autocracies like Putin. And for some weird reason, even though he's not right-wing, Kim. And then we got the other Hungary or whatever it is. I can't. His name starts with an O. Anyway, he's just worried about cozying up with other right-wing autocrats, including the one from Brazil that's going to jail. He should be supporting Ukraine against Russian aggression. Instead, he's blaming Ukraine for being invaded by Russia. He should be trying to maintain and extend NATO commitments. Instead, he's like goes over to Europe and takes a piss all over NATO. He should be trying to have diplomatic engagement and cooperation. Instead, I don't know if you read his letter that basically just pissed off Europe. He should be promoting democracy and human rights. Instead, he's undermining it here in our own country. Like, no, he has not solved 8 wars. He hasn't solved 7. He hasn't solved 6. Hasn't solved 5. Hasn't solved 4. Hasn't solved 3. Hasn't solved 2. Hasn't even solved 1. There is not one conflict he has settled. He has gotten a ceasefire that already existed when he took office. Then got everybody killed, got a bunch more people killed with his, Trump crow, and then got another ceasefire during which like another 1,200 Gazans have either been killed or wounded. So even a ceasefire that he supposedly achieved is not a ceasefire. There is no peace. None of the things he's claiming brought peace. He has undermined our allies as weak and decaying. His letter supports far-right movements destabilizing democracies. He's siding with Russia over Ukraine. He's threatening to just pull out of NATO altogether, something which I don't even think he has the authority to do. I'm pretty sure that treaties are set by the president, but agreed to and confirmed by Congress. I think we need to have congressional approval to pull out of NATO, but with this Congress, you never know. They're just conceding all of their constitutional powers to, Trump because they're sycophants. So he's doing everything that you would do if you didn't want to help promote world peace. Meanwhile, and it's like, even you look at the Russia agreement, he's like telling Ukraine to just, basically, well, you got invaded, give them what you want. It's like telling the bank, you got robbed, give up the money. He wants to reward Putin for committing war crimes. And then he wants the Nobel Peace Prize for doing that. You look at what he's got going on with Israel. His peace agreement has him end up being in charge of the whole Gaza Strip. That's not a peace plan. That's an emperor acting like an emperor. There was no park war, and this is such a joke. There was a skirmish or two that was resolved between the two of them, and then he kind of just like wants to take credit for it. Orban, that's the guy with the O. That's who I was trying to think of. Sabia. Yeah, the drugs are still coming in, even after we bombed the boats, right? So obviously, bombing the boats is not stopping the drugs. And you know what else? The price of drugs as you know, if AI is to believed on this. I don't know because I've never bought drugs, but the price of drugs, apparently the street price has not changed, so the supply has not been affected. You want to blame? That's a what have you done? Like why you want to blame Biden but you don't want to blame Trump? I am not talking about who is to blame for the drug war. I'm saying if you want to solve the problem, you should be doing certain things, and he is not doing the things that you should be doing. And the things he is doing are hurting it. I'm not blaming him for the drug war. I'm blaming him for what he is doing and not doing. The price of my chemo has gone down. Oh, I hope you don't mean chemotherapy, right? You're not. Mom said your hot pocket is ready. I don't actually eat hot pockets. I don't eat processed food at all. So I don't know why. There's like you try to have a civil conversation and talk to people about facts, and what they do is they just come up with childish insults instead. He has. This is my new favorite one. He has the border shut down with cartels, drug smuggling. All right, people. Border with an A means somebody who pays for rent. A border, like in a room in your house. A border, BORDER, is something between two countries. Okay. But the border is not shut down. What he did is not shut down the border. What he did is just shut down asylum. You can't seek asylum anymore. It's a U.S. law. It's an international law. He said you can't do it anymore. He didn't shut down the border. You can still come over the border. People still go both ways, back and forth across the border. He just shut down asylum. So now people have no legal way to come over here if they're being persecuted, unless they're white South Africans, in which case we fly you over here. I think what you have done is irrelevant because I don't think it's about you or me. I think you asking the question is stupid because we're not talking about like what is and anyway, I'm not going to get into a dumb conversation about that. All right, so what if none of the things that he is none of his stated goals we've gone through. Like, let's look at these scores here. Like, he's got a -10 for promote world peace. He's got -11 for stop drugs and cartels. He's got -11 for solving the immigration crisis. And he's got -8 for improving the economy. All the things he's doing actually hurt his stated goals. And I noticed that nobody has actually talked about the substance of what I'm saying. They've just done a lot of denialing. What does he want to do? What are his actions consistent with? What are his policies consistent with? And that is to stop the replacement. This is not something out of left field. This is something that's talked about in Project 2025. It's something that Elon Musk went on and on about. And what is it? It is this theory that somehow Democrats are trying to import migrants, bring over illegal immigrants, and get them to vote for Democrats. And so then the Republicans will lose elections because the Democrats have illegal immigrants voting for them, or some other kind of irrational nonsense. Then all these people of color are going to like propagate and propagate faster than white people. And before you know it, there's going to be more people of color than white people. And then we're destroyed as a nation because people have pigment. Like this is the be all and end all of all their philosophy. Now, if you believe that, you might try to stop it. And if you were trying to stop it, you might do certain things. And that is where the rubber hits the road. When you start looking at if Donald Trump were trying to stop the replacement of white people in America, what would he do? And then you start seeing everything he does is 100% consistent with fulfilling this racist conspiracy theory. No, I'm not actually interested. I don't want to know what you think you did. So, but you can type it, but I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to get distracted. So, all right. If you wanted to stop replacement, the first thing you'd want to do is get rid of as many people that are already over here as you could. So the mass deportations, what he's doing, you know, like even if you look at, it's true that the majority of immigrants that are here illegally are people of color. But even if you factor that in, the percentage of people that are being deported are completely out of proportion with the number of people that are here illegally. There are white people here illegally, believe it or not. People from Europe come over and overstay their visas, and then they just stay here. And they're here illegally. They didn't sneak over the southern border, but they're here illegally. They're here just as illegally as somebody that snuck over the foreign border. But 95% of the people that have been detained are people of color. Why is that? It's only like 65% of undocumented immigrants are people of color, but 95% of the ones that have been being detained are people of color. Why is that? Replacement theory. It's not about immigration. It's about colored people coming over here. All right. You close the legal pathways. So when you talk about he shuts down asylum, all right, that's a legal pathway. You can't say do it legally and then close down the entire legal way that people can do it. Like, how can you do it? That's why I keep saying, what do you know about immigration law? Like, actually learn about how the legal ways are and how most people can't do it. And they're going to die if they don't. You talk about remain in Mexico. The percentage of people that are migrants that are waiting in Mexico, like 90% of them are victims of violent crimes. And Mexico only has like a 2 or 3% solve rate in those crimes. They're open season on the cartels and the violent criminals. So what do you think they're going to do? Do you think they're going to wait 5 years for their asylum hearing? Or do you think that they're going to get desperate and pay a coyote to smuggle them over? Again, it's a top down. Like, actually, if you want to solve the problem, this is not what you do, unless the problem you're trying to solve is people of color coming to America. If that's the problem you're trying to solve, then this is absolutely what you do. And birthright citizenship, well, we know that he's doing that, right? Even though his mama was an immigrant, his wife is an immigrant, his grandfather was an immigrant. Terminate TPS, parole programs. This one to me is like really just so offensive. These are people that came over on their own dime. They did everything they could to come over here legally. People said, come over here legally. And they followed all the laws. They came over here legally. And then Trump says, whoops, I'm revoking this status. You're not over here legally anymore. And then justifies it. Well, they shouldn't have been over here illegally. How do you do that? How do you just say you're not over here legally anymore and then accuse them of not coming over here legally? They can, they're supposed to swim across the ocean? Why can't they seek asylum here? You should feel guilty. Why is it, we have the lowest rate of accepting refugees and asylum seekers of any country in the Western world, any first world country. Every country in Europe accepts more refugees and asylum seekers than we. Don't ask me why they can't. They're doing it. We're the ones that shut down asylum. We're the ones that are sending people who paid to come over here back. So attack family reunification when she's done. He's trying to end that. The one route that 98% of the colored people in the world have to come over here, he's shutting that down. He's cutting refugee admissions almost to where the only way you can be a refugee is if you're a white person now, which already as all the legal mechanisms are already, favor the white. Your legal you have a 20 times greater chance of being able to immigrate over here legally if you are white than if you are black. NSS warns of Europe's civilization erasure. This is that wacko screed that he sent over there that was probably typed in Marco Rubio's woke font or whatever all that was about. But yeah, he's talking about, and we got the guy that was just complaining about, well, why don't you have Europe take some? Why do we have to feel guilty? Well, Donald Trump is telling them not to take any either. They're supporting the far right parties. Elon Musk literally gave a speech to Nazis over there in Germany, of all places. And he wants to get all offended that we called him a Nazi. He told Europe that they should cultivate resistance to immigration. He's trying to end it, like he wants to not just end it here, he wants to end it there. He wants to preserve whiteness. He does not want to make America great again. He's just a racist. Admit it. It's okay to admit it when it's true. He's trying to undermine the EU. So because if he can undermine the EU and he's cultivating and propping up these right-wing parties, it's only, he's hoping that he can topple the EU because he thinks he's emperor of the universe. The public charge rule, filter for wealth and whiteness. This means the whole immigration system being stacked up. He's banning Muslims. He's got this list of 19 countries now where people who have done everything the right way, everything the legal way, they've been living here legally, doing everything legally, on their day that they're supposed to get citizenship, being told, nope, sorry, this one guy did this one thing, and he's from Afghanistan, and you're from Argentina or whatever. And so you don't get to become a citizen because this other guy did this other thing from another country. So he just took 19 countries because of what one guy from Afghanistan did, and who we basically have a responsibility in his doing that too. This is just he saw an opportunity to be more racist and do more racist stuff, and then he just said, okay, if you're from any of these 19 countries, you're not allowed to become a citizen until we do a more vetting. And we haven't even found one thing that we missed in vetting in vetting with that guy. We've talked so much about vetting, never seen a single thing that says we missed something in vetting. And even what's her name, Bondi, says that he was, radicalized here. When like what radicalized means or whatever. We haven't heard who radicalized him. If you, by all accounts, it looks like he just lost it. He was going on long road trips by himself, shutting himself in the room. Like he lost it. He went through and did some horrible stuff. Sorry, PG channel. And so he like lost it. And I honestly think he just committed suicide by cop, but he used soldiers to do it and killed, one and nearly killed another. I'm not trying to excuse him, saying that he was mentally not well. And that in part is on us because we're the ones that put him in the situation that broke him. He's defunding integration programs, the programs that help immigrants assimilate. Like I see so many MAGAs complaining that immigrants don't want to assimilate. He's hurting that issue. If you want him, if you're like, oh, I'm fine with legal immigration, why won't they assimilate? But then you're cheering when the thing that helps them assimilate is taken away. How do you reconcile those things? And he's hurting the country. Economically, he is damaging the country because what matters to him more than the economy? Getting rid of people of color. He's even willing to destabilize alliances for ideological goals. And what is he doing that's counterproductive to fighting replacement theory? Absolutely nothing. Everything he is doing is explainable through this prism, through the prism of white supremacy. It all makes sense then. Everything he does makes sense when you look at it that way. Nothing makes sense if you look at it any other way. But when you look at it this way, it is 100% exactly what he's doing. So, and then these are the rebuttals. Oh, they're not immigrants. They are immigrants. By definition of the word, they are immigrants. They are people that came from another country to here. The ones that came here legally are legal immigrants. If you revoke their legal status just out of the blue because somebody else somewhere else did something, that does not mean that they did something wrong. This is what I mean when I say we need to look at the system and look at how to reform the system. You don't just get like, if somebody, you're just too stupid to deal with. I'm sorry. My wife says I shouldn't call people stupid, but that's a stupid comment, dude. I just explained it. They came over here legally. They literally came over here legally. What do you think the word immigrant means? Of course they're immigrants. If you are not native, indigenous tribes, people of either the or Eagle, you are an immigrant. I am not sure I grok what is wrong with honoring your own culture while living in another country. I mean, we have St. Patrick's Day, right? We have Oktoberfest. We have Christmas. Christmas was imported. Christmas wasn't even made up by Christians. I think, like, to me, like, there is not one aspect of American culture that is not influenced by immigration. Our music, our TV, our movies, our food, everything is a product of immigration of many different cultures. We really are a melting pot. To say that we assimilation is like what we are. Our culture is a culture of people that have assimilated to live together and to experience things together. That's the beauty of America. All right, like we without Germans, we wouldn't even have hot dogs and hamburgers. Without the Dutch, we wouldn't have apple pie. Without Africans, we wouldn't have our music. We wouldn't have like rap music. We wouldn't have pop music. We wouldn't have jazz music. We wouldn't have rock and roll music. We wouldn't have heavy metal music. We wouldn't have any of the music that is culturally popular. Without Eastern European Jews, we wouldn't have had Broadway. So much of Broadway came from the Jews. The Irish brought us vaudeville, and then vaudeville became sitcoms. Like Lucille Ball's family were vaudeville, and then she brought that to the TV screen. So all the sitcoms and everything like that evolved out of that, all that comes from the Irish. And you always hear people say, "Oh, well, you know, when they try to make it like somehow white Europeans aren't immigrants." That you're just telling on yourself. Yes, Irish people were immigrants. German people were immigrants. You're just telling on yourself when you try to discount them as being immigrants, because what you're telling me is that really it's not about the immigrant. It's about the pigment. So it is racism. It doesn't have to do with the legal way. It doesn't have to do with any of that stuff. So if you were just sitting there thinking, "Oh, but they're all white," you're just telling on yourself. No, I don't hate the US, and I am not full of hate. I'm the one here saying, hey, white supremacy is bad. That does not make me the hateful one. The people that defend it are the hateful ones. And I served my country. Did you? I don't know, maybe you did. But as a veteran, no, I don't hate America. And my dad, retired Air Force and a retired Foreign Service officer. My grandfather was a cook in Vietnam, or in World War II, I'm sorry. My dad was in Vietnam. My grandfather was a cook in World War II. My great-grandfather fought in World War I. I have ancestors that go back and fought on both sides of the Civil War, and I have ancestors that go all the way back and fought in the Revolution. So no, I don't hate my country just because I'm not a white supremacist. If you identify one's loyalty to this country by one's loyalty to whiteness, you hate the country, not me. The Democrats are the party of hate, bro. No, they're not. This is just, like whatever that means. Like there's no like cognitive reality to start from a position like that. Democrats hate America. That's not an argument. That's not a rebuttal. That's just a stupid thing to say. There is, in fact, a reservation. There is an Irish monument on a reservation lands. Interesting. Interesting. So there must have been some Irish influence or alliance there with the tribe. I've often wondered, like with the Druids in Ireland and going way back, like they would have felt like the Native Americans were their kinfolk. Look up Country Cork and Negative Indigenous Peoples Monument. I'll look it up. Hopefully I'll remember. Okay, Kitty, can you remind me of that and send it to me in a DM, and then I can maybe talk about that on the next show. Because otherwise I might forget. So if my cult culture tells me to kill the infidel, what benefit is that to a freedom-based constitutional republic? I have no idea what any of that has to do with anything that I said. I don't have a cult culture telling anybody to kill whatever infidel. What I honestly don't know what you're talking about. I'm not trying to belittle you. I have no idea what that means. All right. So now that does that, but that's that part of the show. Which went on, that was supposed to last half an hour, and we're 2 hours in. So I'm going to try and go into, I've been trying to go through this, and then I got sick last time. So now I want to start talking a little more about, don't be a self-hating. So I want to go more into how we created the whole mess in South America in the first place. And so previously I have discussed what happened before, going back to like the 1807 to, the turn of the 20th century, where we were kind of had the Monroe Doctrine, and we basically told Europe, stay out of the Western Hemisphere. This is ours to deal with. And then in the early 1900s, we had the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine that said, if there needs to be policing here, we're going to do the policing. And we used that as kind of a platform to colonialize South America. This was on the heels of, we had just in 1890, the census declared manifest destiny is done. We've run out of land. We had gotten all the way to the West Coast. And so where do we go from there, right? So we started looking around, and we started looking at Latin America. We started looking at the Caribbean islands. We started looking at Hawaii. Started looking at these other areas and saying, how can we evolve from here? And so those two things coupled together, along with Roosevelt's rather serious racism, by the way, I'm gonna have to do something on. I didn't know he was like his race, and he was racist enough that if he were here sitting next to me and I accused him of being racist, he would be like, you're not? Like, he literally thought white people were better than everybody else. And by white people, I mean like British white people. Like, we're better than the Germans and the Irish type thing. He was devout racist. And there was like some interesting stuff about that, because also in some ways he was really liberal. I think we've kind of like gotten into this notion that we think like liberal and conservative are like racist, not racist. You could be conservative and not a racist, and you could be liberal and a racist. Roosevelt was liberal and a racist. He had some really liberal ideas. So anyway, I'm meandering. History is pretty interesting though. Like if you start like learning it. So anyway, we had the Roosevelt corollary, and then we started injecting ourselves into South American politics. And the first really serious thing we did was with the Panama Canal. We basically let a guy named J.P. Morgan set the Panama Canal in motion, to where we bought the half finished thing from the French company, and then we overthrew. Well, we supported Panama in its rebellion against Venezuela, and then we also, shortly after that, Nicaragua wanted to do a Panama, or do a canal. While we were still trying to finish up the Panama Canal, Nicaragua was like, hey, we should do a canal. And they got Germany and Japan interested, and they were going to invest in it. But we didn't like them talking about doing that because we were spending all this money on the Panama Canal, and plus, U.S. interests and all that. And so we sponsored a coup in Nicaragua. This is interesting. I don't know where you get that I'm self-centered. And Ben Franklin, you check my channel. Ben Franklin was he was interesting, because he was a racist until he wasn't. He started off as a racist, and he was like really anti, like even anti-German. There was a racial slur, something Boers or whatever, that he would use against the Germans, and he wanted to make German publications illegal, even though he published books in German. So he's willing to make the money, but not willing enough. But he also thought it should be illegal. He thought the Germans were going to take over Pennsylvania and so on. But then the revolution happened, and a bunch of Germans really helped win the war, and so he changed his mind. Then he went to France, and in France he started encountering all kinds of different people. He came back. He was actually a changed man in that regard, and he ended up becoming the president of the Abolition Society. So, I mean, abolition meant something different then than it did 100 years later, but still, it's a lot of progress from a guy that was an overt racist. And I'm doing a series of whiteboard videos, explainer videos on like just I think the founding fathers are interesting in terms of their views on racism and views on race. And there's Thomas Jefferson could write that all men are created equal, and then look outside his window and see his sheep and his children and think of them the same way, as being, well, I can, if I breed them enough times, then I can change what they are. So anyway, he literally wrote out a mathematical formula, how many generations it would take before you're not black anymore. Colombia, I'm sorry, you're right, Patriot. Thank you for correcting me. The government was Colombia that they overthrew, or that they sponsored the rebellion of Panama against. Thank you for fixing that. I hate having mistakes, but good to catch me. And the U.S. military actually went down there and participated. We sent the U.S. Marines to help Panama. So it wasn't just give them a thumbs up and say, you guys go ahead. So, and then the whole thing with Panama was, we spent for 100 years or something, it was 4% of our GDP was what came through the Panama Canal. We bought it. The J.P. Morgan bought it for the current uh, like the modern day equivalent of $40 million. He sold it to the US for $1 billion. We ended up getting like the benefit from that was like trillions of dollars over the lifespan. And all of that, you think about this, like when I talk about um, our lasting effect, Colombia is, I think, 84% of cocaine comes from Colombia. So what if in a parallel universe we did not support the overthrow of Panama? What the alternative was is there were like 2 years left on the French had made a treaty with Colombia, and if they hadn't finished the canal on time, it defaulted over to Colombia, and Colombia could keep it, and then they could finish it. And that's why they voted down the US proposal. And it was like already halfway done. And the French, and by the French I mean like the West Indian people, like not actual like French people weren't the ones building it. They were indentured servituding their way out of that, out of the actual work. But anyway, just say hypothetically, Colombia keeps the canal, right? There is no Panama. And then all that money, instead of going to the United States, goes to Colombia. How much difference does that make on all of Central America over the next 100 years? Like, you think about it. All right. So then let me talk about the United Fruit Company. Okay. Let me go to this tab. And I've been calling this whole section, and I meant to go over this in one day, but it's just way too complicated. And I was halfway through this the other day when my stomach got upset. So we've got the United Fruit Company, and I won't go through all of this again, but the United Fruit Company like had more authority and more power over Guatemala than the actual government did. And it made more money than the actual government did. And the GDP of the entire country, was like $250 or something like that. It was the second poorest country on earth. And that was poor by those standards. And if you want, I've got in the YouTube description, and I think should be in the Twitter subscription too, and I'll put it in the Substack if you're watching later. The dashboard that I'm looking at, it has some other things in there, but even like a poor black family in America in the 50s made like 10 times as much relative to the cost of living as the average, mind you, Guatemalan family. Like, they were destitute. The entire country was destitute, with the exception of the UFC, who were these mostly Wall Street bankers and corporate overlords and stuff. Now, have you ever heard of Dulles International Airport? I bet you have. And that's named after, I think it's named after John Dulles. He and his brother were both in the government, and they also both had major shares in the United Fruit Company. This is such an interesting story. And so if you know anything about World War II and the Cold War, I'm sorry, not World War II, but the Cold War and everything, the theory that prevailed throughout the entire Cold War was this idea called the domino theory. And the domino theory was, if one country falls, then eventually everybody is going to fall. All the other countries are going to be dominoes. They're all going to fall to communism. And so anything remotely left of fascism in South America and Latin America, immediately everybody was called a communist. So this guy, this guy. Oh, and by the way, United Fruit Company, just in case you didn't know, Chiquita bananas. That's what it is now. Those Chiquita bananas, and this is literally where we get the whole idea of a banana republic. Is from this era. Okay, so this I went through the other day, and I'm just gonna. So the average income. This is just insane. Average Guatemalan per capita income. This is a year, $112 a year. 2% of landowners controlled 70% of all the arable land, and they had a whole bunch of land. The UFC owned all this farmable land that they wouldn't farm because they didn't want to lower the cost of bananas. And so you had these people that were starving to death and just absolutely being destroyed, just destitute, and they can't even get a job to buy a banana, much less grow a banana. So then this guy comes along, and not only that, the UFC, they were underreporting the value of the land and the value of things on their taxes. So kind of like Donald Trump, right? So then we're gonna jump to here. This guy named Jacob Arbenez. I'm saying his name wrong. I'm sorry. I don't speak Spanish. But this guy, Jacob Arbenez, he's elected president. And he ran on a platform of land farm and economic deployment. And he saw a country where one American company was wealthier than the entire government, where most people lived in dire poverty, and where vast stretches of arable land, meaning farmable, sat unused while people starved. That seems like a pretty reasonable thing to say. Things could be better. So Guatemala had extreme land inequity. 26% of landowners owned 76% of arable land, or 2% of landowners owned 70% of arable land. Most of it was just sitting unused as reserve. Meanwhile, indigenous peasants had no land to farm, massive malnutrition and poverty. Average annual income was $112, about 31 cents a day. And UFC's profits alone were twice the government's entire budget. And they got to determine how the government spent its money. They were in charge of the phones. They were in charge of the utility. They were in charge of the road. They were in charge of the entire country. It was basically a privately owned country. And so what he did is he ran on a policy that he wanted to use this, the same thing we have here, we call eminent domain. He wanted to buy land from the UFC and then let farmers, indigenous farmers, give them a loan equal to like 2 years of pay or something, and let them buy their own land and then have their own land to work. Instead of being like peons, they could be farmers. And he wanted to pay the UFC the very, very fair price of what they asked, what they declared on their taxes. And these Dulles brothers that I was talking about, John Foster Dulles, Secretary of State under Eisenhower, and then Alan Dulles, who was the CIA director under Eisenhower, they did not like that because they both owned a lot of stock in United Fruit. So what they did is this was the domino theory I was telling you about. So they came up with this thing called Operation PB Success. And they sponsored a coup against a democratically elected president that was not a communist. He was not a communist. He might, like nowadays you might say he was a social democrat. Like he wanted to, didn't want to end private property. He just wanted to open the doorway so that more people could have it. The actual closer to a communist here was the UFC. They're the ones that owned everything, operated it. Like UFC controlled the means of production and distribution. It was like corporate communism. And I don't know if that's a real word, but it's something I just made up. And it's basically effectively what they were. But John Dulles and his brother were big owners in the UFC. So they had a big interest. And then they used their government power to sponsor a coup. And Guatemala has never recovered from that. Guatemala has been, for the last 36 years, or for the next 36 years, there was like one military dictator after another. There were some UFC workers. And by UFC workers, I mean native workers, the people that worked farming for UFC. They slaughtered 1,000 of them, the new dictators, because they dared to unionize and demand better conditions. Because that's communism. In MAGA world, communism and unions are just the same thing. Forget that it's just they're not, but why do reality ever have to matter when it comes to MAGA? They had a 36-year civil war. All of this came out of this whole thing. 200,000 people were killed during this. 45,000 people disappeared. The whole disappeared thing in Latin America, I don't know if you know about it. Like, people would just be walking down the street and never seen again. And it happened like there, it happened in Argentina, and now it's happening here in America. 626 villages were destroyed. There was the genocide of the Mayan populations, which that could be a whole other episode. We're still discovering mass graves. All labor unions and peasant organizations were outlawed. Land reforms were reversed. Land returned to the large landowners like UFC. And everything went back to extreme poverty and inequality. The workers killed at Finca Jacutin weren't killed for being communists. They were killed for forming the first private sector union in Guatemala. They had to organize to demand higher wages than 31 cents per day, better working conditions, and better labor rights. So that's all they wanted. They wanted what we assume we should have in America. They were not communists. They were not arguing for, the government to own and control all means of, distribution. And then all of this, the death, the genocide, the decades of war, were to protect United Fruit Company's, aka Chiquita Bananas, unused banana plantations. This wasn't even to take away the banana trees they had. This was just to grow bananas on land that wasn't being used at all, so that starving people could eat. And all of this was so that UFC's $65 million in annual profits wouldn't be threatened. Now, what does that have to do with today? A lot, because Guatemala never recovered. It's one of the top sources of asylum seekers in the United States. The people that come from Guatemala seeking asylum are coming from a country we destroyed. It's never recovered from the Civil War. It has institutions destroyed, has extreme poverty, over 50%. It's worse now than it was in 1950. Among indigenous populations, it's an 80% poverty rate. And of course, when you have that, you're going to have gang violence. You're going to have political instability. We caused it. Like, we caused it. We need to understand we made this mess. I remember, was it Colin Powell who said if we go into Iraq, if we break it, we have to fix it? Something like that. We broke it and we never fixed it. Indigenous people there are still marginalized. Like, I hear so many people say that, like, seem to think that people from Latin America can't be racist. You realize there are white people in Latin America, and there are racist white people in Latin America. Just because somebody's last name is Hernandez does not mean they can't be a white racist person. Spain, the last time I checked, was in Europe. Spanish people are European, are Caucasian. And Spanish people settled Latin America. That's why we call it Latin America. Well, Spanish people and Brazilian people, because Brazil is Portuguese. Land inequality remains extreme. GDP per capita today is $5,400, but wealth concentrated at top. If you ever are interested, there's something called a Gini index you can look at that shows wealth disparity by nation. And actually, the US is not very good there. It's actually kind of depressing. But you look at countries like Guatemala and South Africa and the wealth disparity. But we're taking in the number one country in terms of wealth disparity in the entire world is South Africa. But we're taking in the wealthy white people and giving them asylum. How does that make sense? They call them farmers. They're not farmers, they're plantation owners. GDP per capita today, okay, top 5% over in Guatemala today control over 85% of the wealth. I think their Gini index is like 57, which is high. No real middle class exists. It's just you're either rich or you're not, or you're destitute. Guatemala has the highest GDP in Central America, yet some of the highest malnutrition and poverty rates in the region. The pattern we established, extreme inequality, wealth extraction, corporate control over government never ended. We didn't just overthrow a president, we locked an entire country into permanent poverty and violence. So I've been talking about this parallel between us and the Star Wars universe, right? We always watch Star Wars and we always think of ourselves as Luke Skywalker and the evil empire, right? We're the evil empire. Arbanez was Luke Skywalker and we killed him. All he wanted was to redistribute unused land to landless peasants, pay for it at the value that UFC declared. And I always think about, like, when I kept thinking about this with Trump, and he was all mad that the judge declared that Mar-a-Lago was worth this amount of money, and he said it's worth way more than that. The judge was declaring what Trump said it was worth on his taxes. So it's like this same thing. UFC declared less than its value so they could save money on taxes, and then they got called to the carpet and treated the land like it was worth what they said they was worth, and all of a sudden it's worth more. What we did, we called him a communist. He wasn't. We overthrew democracy. He won a free and fair election. We installed a dictatorship, and we enabled 36 years of war and genocide. Why? To protect the fruit companies' banana plantations and the stupid Dulles brothers' stupid corporate investment. The people who ordered the coup, Secretary of State and CIA director, who owned stock in the UFC. Like, do you get, like, am I the only one that gets, like, just pissed seeing that and reading that and thinking about that? People that owned stock in a corporation ordered a coup that destroyed a nation for the next half century. And we're mad. We've got an airport named after one of those dudes. We've got an airport in Washington, D.C., named after one of those dudes. And now we want to say that they're bad because the situation we made is unlivable. So today, Guatemalans flee the violence and the poverty we created. We call them illegal and build walls and shut down asylum and accuse them of, being fraudulent and lazy and whatever. Let's see you go down there and pick bananas for a day. But the reason I wanted to highlight, there was a lot of other stuff that happened in this period during the Cold War. I wanted to highlight this for a couple of reasons. One is this was like the linchpin. If Panama and Nicaragua, they were like the precursor, this is like what really started for the Cold War. An entire 50 years of South American policy of just disrupting one government after another. Since 1907, we have forced the change of 41 different governments in South America. So why is it that it's so destable? It's not their fault. It's our fault. We're the ones that keep destabilizing it. It's like playing Jenga with the guy that keeps kicking the table and asking you why the tower keeps coming down. We call any threat to the U.S. corporate interest communism, right? And even if nowadays that includes if the threat to the corporate interests are the other party. We use CIA for covert regime change instead of direct military intervention. Excuse me, hiccups. We install compliant dictators. We don't care how evil they are as long as they're compliant. As FDR once said, he's an evil dictator, but he's our evil dictator, something like that. We support them no matter how brutal they are. Just ask Ronald Reagan about that. Justify it all with domino theory, which, by the way, was hogwash. This playbook was used in Chile, in Nicaragua, in El Salvador, and countless other interventions. And it started because the Dulles brothers wanted to keep their bananas. What time you want to run some dungeons? Are you two talking about Dungeons and Dragons or something? Hey, did you forget that Ilhan? No, I did not forget that Ilhan Omar married her brother. She did not marry her brother. Are you okay with men that are trying to be women going into women's bathrooms? There's no such thing as men trying to be women going into women's bathrooms. There are transgender women that need to pee. And and yes, I'm okay with transgender women peeing. The Democrats want men to be women, and no, the Democrats recognize that transgender people exist. There's not like some sort of gospel to get people to become the other gender or something. Why are you guys so weird? And what does this have to do with anything to do with South America? Why is it that MAGAs cannot like hold a train of thought that doesn't have to do with transgender people? Like, man, I wonder what your Pornhub searches are. Okay. Yep. He's talking about Ukraine. Am I missing something here? I think I'm missing out on some kind of conversation here. So being a woman who uses women's bathrooms, I'm absolutely fine with transgender women. There has never been a transgender woman convicted of assaulting a woman in a women's bathroom, in a public women's bathroom. There have been, I think it's over 50% of transgender women are assaulted each year using the public men's room. So, are you okay with people beating up transgender women just because they're transgender? That's the real question. There, Hawaii has its own set of evil crap. I think there's a Netflix or a show on that on Apple. I haven't watched the whole thing, but yeah, America's done a lot of evil crap. Like, not gonna deny it. They're just like so weird. So Kitty says, in case you're listening, they're obsessed with their genitals and gender issues and sexuality. It's their fixation. It's like everything has, and it's like they don't even like, to them, transgender is about sex. I think that maybe what they're afraid of is that they're going to get turned on by a transgender woman, and then they're not going to know if they're straight or gay anymore, or maybe they're I don't know. So, are you okay with pedophiles? She says. Not to me, but to the transphobic guy, because Donald Trump is clearly not, or is clearly okay. I don't know who's gaslighting. I don't know if I'm gaslighting or somebody else is gaslighting. Hawaii has tons of poop, pineapple people, the sugar cane people, the coffee people, the sandalwood people. So, do I have any comments I need to address here? Going back up. Anyway, I find that whole thing about Guatemala really, really fascinating. So, all right. Well, if you're wrong about that on Trump, bro, I don't know what I'm wrong about with Trump. I don't know where you get your information from, but you are dead wrong. Here's my position on men and women's sports. It's not an issue. Now, I don't mean it's not an issue in terms of whether it's right or wrong or whatever. I'm just mean it's not an issue. There are like 4 transgender women playing college sports. There's like less than 100 playing high school sports. Like this is just, to me, not a thing that the federal government needs to be like focused on. I think it's just a distraction that gets people like, Trump for life 79 there, all hyped up, and, like, whatever. Okay, it makes you mad that trans people exist. I get it. I don't know what I'm wrong about on Trump, and I don't know where I get my information from that is so bad, but I'm just telling you, transgender people exist. That's a fact of not just the present day. That's a fact of history. Throughout every civilization, throughout time, trans people have existed. Some people honor transgender people and make them priests and priestesses. Like, look it up. Transgender people have always existed. It's the issue is not whether or not transgender women can play women's sports. The issue is, why not just let the leagues decide? I think there are some sports where transgender women can have an advantage, but there's also sports where transgender men have an advantage because there's different biologies and stuff like that. So, like, women have a better like oxygen retention in their blood cells or something. So when it comes to like transgender men in endurance sports, they tend to actually achieve better. But overall, There's really no difference. And here's the other thing about transgender people in sports at all. Transgender people, like over half of them, try to kill themselves before they graduate from school. And the number one thing that helps with that is participation in team activities. So, Sally finishing sixth instead of fifth in a cross country race one time is not on my list as being as crucial as the person that ahead of her finished one spot ahead of her or tied with her, Riley Gaines, actually like not dying. Like, I think that we need to, like, again, this is a solution oriented thing. We need to look at, like, people need to first understand what transgender issues are. If you've never talked to a transgender person, actually talk to one. Don't just form your opinions on this from Fox News or whatever. Like, learn something. It's really cool if you learn things. Okay, that's all I'm saying about the transgender thing. Not letting this whole show get hijacked by people yelling about transgender people. Democrats did not campaign on abortion. They campaigned on the right to choose. Yeah, this is like this kind of thing. I don't know if you're serious when you say this or if you're like, if you really mean it. Talk to more Democrats. Like, actually talk to people. Like, some meme you saw where there were children in a library with drag people is not what, like, no, Democrats did not campaign on that. And I don't have a problem with that. The parents that brought their kids there, don't they have a right? Don't they have parental rights? Or is it only the parents you agree with that have parental rights? Nobody's like strapping MAGA kids into chairs and forcing them to watch drag people read. And also, drag people and transgender people aren't the same group of people. Drag is not the same thing as trans. Learn what words mean and use them correctly, especially if you're going to have a serious conversation. Reported for misinformation. Well, I don't know whatever happened to Mr. Information. You are just here to argue, Kelly. I'm just here to talk. You're here to argue. I mean, I'm here, like, anyway. It's my show. Trump has been accused of raping more women than there are transgender athletes in the world. I think that might be actually a fact. Why is it necessary then? Why is what necessary? I don't know what it is. All the trans girls are like nerds. There's I mean, I hate to sound judgmental, but there is some, like, they always want to make it sound like the quarterback of the high school football team became a transgender athlete so that, he could win the state championship or something. Most trans athletes are people that are, yeah, I don't want to talk about this more. I'm going to have a show where I talk about actual transgender issues, because I just think that too many people don't even understand the physiology of transgender people. And I'm not talking about the physiology after they get hormone treatment. I'm talking about the physiology of transgender people inherent to being transgender people. Part of the being transgender is that they have different body chemistry than their gender. Like, anyway, dude, I don't know what I need to look it up. You're gaslighting it. So this person keeps yelling things, and Amazing how much MAGA cares about how much people pee. How many trans people do you think are? Oh, okay, see, yep. Now we've been totally sideswiped by transgender. This is what I. This is my issue with part of my issue with the whole transgender thing is, it's everything gets reduced. There used to be a like, you lost the argument when you start calling somebody a Nazi, but then Nazis actually made that kind of moot. Even the guy Godwin was called Godwin's Law. Well, even Godwin came out and said, Godwin's Law doesn't apply if you're talking to an actual Nazi. Now we've got trans law. We can call it Kelly's Law if you want, but as soon as MAGAs start bringing up transgender people, they lost the argument. See, you know who else assaults women in female prisons? Cisgender women. I mean, you're talking about prisoners. You're talking about what? Go slap yourself. Just save your mom the trouble, and just slap yourself for being stupid. Okay, Katie Ledecky, the greatest female Olympian. Yes. And we're not comparing Olympic male athletes with Olympic female athletes. It's not, being transgender doesn't mean that a man puts on a wig and then goes and pretends to be a woman. You need to read about this. This is like your argument is like if you had a PhD in geometry and then somebody told you that there's 4 angles in a circle. Like, that's how stupid your argument is. Like, it's just like bragging about how much you don't know about even the most basic fundamental concept of trans people. Please read about it. Like, learn about it. Okay. Lefties are pro-freedom. Yeah, well, like Tim Walz would say, they want the government small enough to fit in your bedroom. All right. So this guy is really wanting to play Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. Or World of Warcraft, I guess. Okay. I've never played World of Warcraft. Does that sound weird? They probably think we drink abortion milkshakes. You're a effing idiot. Well, you might be new here, but the war on apostrophes has to stop. All I ask, I have one rule. Please respect the apostrophe. YOU apostrophe RE. Effing idiot. And also, here, in this case, since it's effing, the letter F is pronounced with an E. So you would actually have to say, you're an effing idiot. And then I would suggest the comma doesn't really work there. You should say, you're an effing idiot. The Y should be capitalized. And then go play with your trans friends, period. If you're going to call me an idiot, be grammatically correct while you're doing it, or I will chew you up. They aren't going to talk to Democrats. They don't. Yeah, I mean, it's like they just convulse in involuntary, spasmodic, physical, verbal reactions. They shout random words and stuff. If you don't want to take your kid to a drag show, then don't. It's really that simple. Just like if I don't want to take my kid to a MAGA rally. I won't. I don't like sit there and say people shouldn't have MAGA rallies. And this guy just keeps saying stuff like another false statement. Well, there we go. Well, that ends that discussion. Boy, you own me. Like, what false statement did I say? What is the evidence that what I said is false? What is the real? Like, just another false statement is just you, like, experiencing cognitive dissonance and rejecting information that you don't like. Depends on how you count it. There's one, there's kind of like a fringe doctor guy that doesn't, he only includes the actual genital area when he looks at it. There's also the vast majority of medical opinions is that there's also chromosomal differences. And what happens is when you are first conceived and the X's and the Y's are arranged and it's determined whether or not you will have a penis or a vagina, or sometimes both. And that's where that 0.1% comes in. Then that's, like some people say that's the sole determinant of health, of gender. But what happens is as you continue to grow, other chromosomes start getting mixed in. And so you can have like different arrangements, and these affect your brain chemistry. And so then when you grow to babyhood and you become a baby, and then as you start to grow into personhood, your brain is actually telling you something different than your body is. And that's a very real thing. And that is about 2%, maybe 1 or 2% of people, they have that. There is a incongruence between their brain and their biology. It is not a thinking and their biology. Their brain chemistry, their actual brain is not reconciled with their penis or their vagina. And they're both biological. I shouldn't say biology because they're both biological. But there's a contradiction. That contradiction is what we call transgender people. What you guys talking about? We're talking about transgender people now, and much against my desire. Okay. All right. Anyway, we're getting to 3 hours, and I really have to pee. Well, that's a compelling argument. So when the Bible calls Satan he, like, was Lucifer Morningstar transgender, or is Satan now is Satan a transgender man or a transgender woman? Like, what is his, like, am I misgendering him when I say him? Is he like Lucy Morningstar now? Tricked by your logic, trans men would be in men's sports, just like trans women are in women's sports. Oh, I see. You're talking to somebody else. Name them. This is just another silly talking point. And this is the overall thing. What does it matter to you? How does it affect your life? How many trans women do you know that are competing in sports? How many do you actually personally know? How many high school girls do you know? Not did you see on Fox News who lost their ribbon because they, like, transgender people they don't affect your life at all. But you want to, like, dedicate the entire federal government to what trans people are. Like, why is this an issue? This is what I mean when I say why is it an issue? Just don't worry about it, dude. Transgender people existing is not going to, like, keep you from getting a job or keep you from like being put in prison because you're brown. Transgender people are not an issue. What's an issue is people making it an issue. Because then you get distracted from things that are issues. We've got a recession coming. We have got people losing their civil rights. We've got the president of the United States murdering people on the open seas. We've got mass deportations going on, people losing their fathers and their mothers. We've got American citizens being deported. And you're worried that somebody is trans? That's the thing that you want to focus on? You're morally bankrupt. And you think that you're in the high place. And just being crude. Hey, you use test. Guess what you pay for breaking down breaking news U.S. taxpayers? We pay for. Okay. Immigrants are pedophiles now or something, I guess. And we're paying for them to be pedophiles. Like, this is... You guys got some weird talking points. Right, I'm going to zip to the bottom here. Okay. Okay, again, I'm not using a straw man. I am saying that this is not an issue for the federal government to deal with. This is something that can be worked out within the leagues that they're in. Because every sport is different. You're using a straw man. You're using the entire transgender issue as a straw man. I am talking, I just sat there and I talked for about an hour on what happened in South America. And you're talking in Guatemala. And you're talking about, but trans people. Who, but trans people here, that is the straw man, like quite literally a straw man. Anyway. All right, everybody. Daddy got to go. And I mean, I got to go to the bathroom bad. So I hope you guys, thank you all, including the MAGAs. I appreciate you MAGAs, especially the ones that hang around and let me yell at you and argue back because, you know, like at least there's a conversation. It may not seem like it's doing any good, but there's hope. There's hope if we can talk to each other. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Kind of hoping the Chiefs don't lose again, but who knows what happens. Anyway, have a great weekend, and thanks again for watching. Appreciate you all.